Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show, DaveJanda.com platform, the home of Operation Freedom. I'd like to thank you for subscribing to our platform. Our goal is to provide you information the bought-off lamestream fake media will never touch and never address. And we bring you the best guests anywhere, not only on the internet, but any guest that we bring forward. I can assure you the bought-off lamestream fake media is either not going to like or they're not going to support. And the reason is because our guests are freedom fighters of the highest order, and I can't think of a better guest to have with us today than Senator Patrick Colbeck. Now, I'm a bit biased. I consider Pat a friend. He's a friend of all of us. He is a warrior on the front line for freedom, for free markets, and for liberty. As you know, I never, underline never, bring someone involved in politics, a politician, to the forefront on my show Operation Freedom or on this series of the Insider Insight shows. I don't consider Pat a politician. Yes, he is a senator. He is the most freedom-based person in politics I know. He is a unique individual. He gets heat from liberals. He gets heat from, quote, conservatives. He probably has as many people in the Republican Party trying to suppress him as he does people in the Democrat Party. And the reason is because he pulls no punches. He's honest. He can't be bought and paid for. And he fights for freedom. He plays it right down the middle. Let me give you a little background on Senator Colbeck. Pat has earned his bachelor's and master's degree, both in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan. Pat has spent 24 years of his life in management and consulting and in the engineering world. This is why he is so unique in the state of Michigan legislature. He's a scientist. He is truly a space engineer. And he brings his factual-based foundation and background to every piece of legislation he brings forward. He's incredibly unique. He was elected to the state of Michigan Senate in November of 2010. He has served admirably. He has served every citizen of the state of Michigan like no other. He is now running for governor of the state of Michigan. It's my honor to have with me Senator Pat Colbeck. Well, Pat, welcome to the Insider Insight Show.
Great to be with you, Dr. Dave, and you've been an inspiration to me early on. Matter of fact, when Angie and I were just getting started in politics, it was all the inspirational talks we heard from you that got us onto the right track. So we appreciate everything you've done.
Well, I thank you for that, Pat. And you have battled so many entities in your career. You know, Pat, what has been your biggest win, if you will, once you got to the Senate?
Yeah, there's a couple big wins, but the biggest is the one that everybody said was impossible to do, and that was making Michigan the 24th right to work state. And that was a long haul. We were being told, I mean, as a freshman legislator, I was being told this would be a 20-year project, and we got it done within 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we did it with a strategy I call the Philippians 4:8 strategy, focusing upon what is noble, true, excellent, and praiseworthy. You know, I represent Wayne County, which is the home of the UAW in mm-hmm. Michigan. When I was out knocking doors during my first election, I was knocking out in Flat Rock, about a mile away from the UAW local headquarters, and I saw a gentleman with a UAW bumper sticker on his F-150 pickup truck. And as I went up to knock on the door of that home, first question he asked me was, "What's your position on right to work?" And I said, "Well, it's about restoring that fundamental freedom of assembly back to rank and file workers. I'm all for it." He goes, "Would you like to put up a yard sign on my front lawn?" And that was before I started looking at the economic benefits and associated with right to work, about how it actually improved the employment, number of jobs in the state. That was a big deal. So a lot of the candidates in this gubernatorial election are talking about the economic improvement we've had over the last 8 years or so. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a lot of economic improvement but I can trace almost all that economic improvement back to that fundamental decision to restore that freedom of assembly back to our rank and file workers and make Michigan a right to work state. The hockey stick goes up right around the passage of that legislation.
But Pat, you took immense grief prior to passage, during the passage, and immediately after.
Yeah.
And in fact,
we did.
In fact, we're the folks that are running against you in the primary on the Republican side, they were mute on the issue, weren't they?
I don't recall Lieutenant Governor talking about it. I don't recall Attorney General talking about it at all. No, I was actually wrestling alligators back then as a freshman legislator. My Senate Majority Leader did not want to take up right to work. He had promised a lot of the unions that it would not be an issue, that he would squelch it before it got out of the starting blocks. And I as a freshman legislator, kind of painted him in a corner with the help of a lot of grassroots activists and with the help of some air cover from some key party officials as well that were very active. And we kind of boxed him and Governor Snyder into a corner, and they finally agreed to push it forward.
Pat, what's been your biggest frustration since serving in the Senate for the past 8 years?
I think a set of misplaced priorities on the part of a lot of my colleagues. I call them swamp priorities, if you will, where they're putting their own career ladder above the best interests of the people of Michigan. They're putting the best interests of lobbyists above the citizens of Michigan. And, we've got a little bit of a divide going on in the Republican Party right now where I like to characterize this divide as between platform Republicans and fraternity Republicans. Fraternity, it's all about their individual relationships and their climb the ladder, and the platform ones are the ones pushing for the freedom and prosperity and low taxation and that's inherent in the Republican platform. But on the other hand, you've got the folks that are just going to do whatever they need to do to get ahead on their own. And that's the biggest frustration. I want more people that are principled serving in public office.
Pat, we have a, quote, Republican governor, Rick, who I call Rick Jennifer Schneider, that has been serving for the past 8 years, who has not been supportive of you, and I'm being very kind when I say that. We've had Senate leadership that has not been supportive of you and your freedom-based efforts. Pat, it's to the point, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you have been suppressed to the point where you have been removed from committee assignments because of your focus on freedom and independence. Is that correct?
Well, I have indeed the only returning senator that was denied chairmanships. And by the way, that's after an exemplary record in my first term, chairing the state police and Department of Military and Veteran Affairs budgets, just to give you a snapshot of performance as that budget chair. I converted their budgets to performance level agreements or service level agreements where it was metrics based, where we were concerned about outcomes, not just throwing them a bunch of money and then coming back a year later and seeing what you think. I actually put together a series of targets, and we met with them on a quarterly basis, and we improved our veteran services in the state of Michigan from the worst in the nation to number 2 in the nation within 4 years. And so when I returned back and was not given any chairmanships, I was very curious as to why. And I sat down with the Senate Majority Leader, and he gave me 4 reasons. Number 1, I was too vocal in my opposition to Medicaid expansion, i.e. Section 2001 of H.R. 3590, known as Obamacare. By the way, on the Republican side of that issue. Number 2, I was too vocal in my opposition to Common Core standards. By the way, I'm on the Republican side of that issue, and we're a Republican majority caucus. And number 3, he said I underperformed in my district we already talked about passing right to work. I was a target of the National Democratic Party, not just the locals. And as a result, I was a couple percentages below what they thought I should do for that particular race. So it was, and then the last thing, he said that I need to talk at more of an 8th grade level with my colleagues.
Maybe more kindergarten level, based on what I've seen.
Yeah, so after that, once it was announced that I was running for governor, my Senate Majority Leader, Arlen Meekoff, wasn't a big fan of my pursuit of the governorship. And so after attending a Right to Life banquet in his district without notifying him, he decided to relieve me of all my committee assignments. Now, on one hand, it's pettiness, but on the other hand, really what it was done the reason he did it was to silence my voice.
Yes.
When you're on a committee, you've got an opportunity to go off and shape legislation. And what he was trying to do is silence my voice. And that's really the common ingredient whenever people in the swamp are pushing policies, they make sure they silence any dissent. And I've seen this time in and time out. When Medicaid expansion was being considered out in the House, the Speaker of the House actually banned me from hitting the House floor because I was making too much of an impact on the other representatives. During the debate around increasing taxes for our roads, I provided an alternative to that as well, and I was banned from the House floor because I was lobbying them and telling them how to fix the roads without increasing taxes. So it is about silencing the voice, and in this gubernatorial race, it is very clear. They put out push poll after push poll and deny any mention of my name in those polls, and this is the media in collusion with the Attorney General. And they're trying to silence my voice once again. And the media is hook, line, and sinker along with it, even when there's things that normally would be newsworthy in their part to cover.
The swamp is not limited to Washington, D.C. It's my contention that there are 50 swamps in our country, and they all are focused at the state capitol level. And I believe, Pat, your experiences have shown that the swamp is infested with both Republicans and Democrats, really, which is why I say there's one political party, that being the Republicans.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think what we're seeing with the electorate, though, is that Republicans, independents, and Democrats are all sick and tired of politics as usual. Mm-hmm. I've gotten very good support in this governor's race, matter of fact, from independent Democrats because they recognize that I'm actually someone who is willing to speak truth to power. I told you about my role in Right to Work, and despite that, I had a gentleman that came up to one of our supporters. He had a bumper sticker on, and I was up in Stillman, Michigan, up in the UP, and he ran up to him at the gas station and said, "That's the guy I'm supporting." He goes, "Oh, really?" Yeah. He goes, and not only that, but everybody at my GM UAW people is supporting him as well. They told us to vote for Hillary in the last election. We voted for Trump. For Gretchen Whitmer in this election, we're voting for Colbeck. And this is not an isolated case. People are just looking for somebody who's going to represent their best interests and speak the truth in that process. And I'm not a bomb thrower. I was with both barrels on public policy, and I don't get personal on it though. And I think we've made a lot of progress and earned a lot of respect from people from across the political spectrum in that regard.
You know, Pat, I believe you should be the role model for every person running for political office because you put people ahead of any self-interest. You speak to freedom. So I want to hit a number of issues, and I want you to give, if you will, as you normally do, very quick, concise position statements on these, because I think you serve as a role model for, as I said, our listenership is in every state of our country. We are, this past week, folks from 67 countries downloaded or heard live on our radio show, Operation Freedom. I believe every one of our viewers, every one of our subscribers, every one of our listeners should consider supporting you either with networking or funding, because I believe the election of Pat Colbeck as governor of the state of Michigan sends a huge message to every person even considering a run for political office in our country. Pat, let's hit each individual topic. Healthcare, your position.
I'm a free market healthcare advocate, and I've been not just recognized at the state level, but also at the national level for my free market healthcare solutions. A lot of them revolve around a loophole in the Affordable Care Act found in Section 10,104 of the Affordable Care Act. And yes, I did read that whole monstrosity. And it's for something called direct primary care services. And I've passed, it's not only legislation that promotes this care model in Michigan, but I've also put it in Wisconsin and Florida and Tennessee, pretty much everywhere I can get some free market advocates. And we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to enjoy freedom as well.
Pat, you set up a pilot project in the city of Detroit focused on Medicaid that will save the state of Michigan hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Yet, Pat, you got immense heat for setting up that pilot project, which will bring better healthcare, more available healthcare, more affordable healthcare, more quality-oriented healthcare to every person on Medicaid that is exposed to your program in the city of Detroit. Who came after you on that, Pat?
Well, the health plans weren't excited about that, and the hospitals are not too excited about that as well. You know, the groups that are intended to take care of people. But the doctors were really big fans of it because they're tired of being micromanaged in their patient relationship, and that's what direct primary care does. It essentially eliminates the middleman between the doctor and the patient. And the best part is, you know, the insurance companies in particular should be all over this because it actually lowers their liabilities because people are kept out of chronic health conditions, they're kept out of the need for catastrophic care like hospitalization. It actually helps the bottom line. And where they've really adopted this in other states, what they've shown is that the premiums for the catastrophic care actually go down as well because they know that this is working. So I'm doing it on Medicaid, which is the single largest line item in our budget. You get 20% off of an $18 billion line item. That is 3.6 into the good for taxpayers. And you don't get those savings by rationing care, what some people like to do. You get it by doing what I know you're a big proponent of, which is preventive care.
So combined HSAs, health savings accounts, direct primary care, I've been told you can save close to 70% of insurance premium costs in the private sector.
That and certificate of need repeal in Michigan, which is nothing but supply side economics where they artificially constrain the number of hospital beds, the number of MRI machines, and you know what happens when you constrain supply, costs go up. And so we're trying to go off and get back into a free market mindset. My goal is to make Michigan the center of free market healthcare revolution.
Let's take another subject. You have attacked the road situation as a scientist versus a career politician. Educate our viewers and listeners on your position on roads, how we can enhance the roads in the state of Michigan so they're not like the lunar landscape. Yet can do it without raising taxes as the governor, Rick Jennifer Schneider, would like to do.
Well, when we started this whole discussion on roads in the state of Michigan, we spent about $3.3 billion per year on roads. They calculated that they needed another $1.2 billion in order to keep the roads from degrading any further. And I took a different approach. I said, well, you know what? Rather than increasing the revenue associated with the roads, let's see what we can do to actually decrease the expenses. And I started looking into alternative road construction techniques. And turns out there's a couple different ways to go off and fix our roads without increasing taxes. If you can get them to last longer with a reasonable upfront cost associated with it, guess what? The total life cycle cost actually lowers. It doesn't increase. And so we found materials like cement hydration catalysts you can mix into the aggregate. You put a sealant on top. You keep the water out. The roads last 3 to 4 times as long. And as I often say in the campaign trail, I have a spreadsheet. I'm not afraid to use it. When you actually do the life cycle cost analysis on it, it's actually less expensive. We actually need less money to maintain our roads, not more. But nobody wants to look at that a solution because they look at roads as a jobs program, a big government jobs program. It's Keynesian economics applied to roads. And I believe that there's a different approach that we should be taking. We need to look at our roads as a public service and find the most economic way to go off and provide that service. And that is a very rare perspective in state government.
It's incredibly rare. In fact, it's limited to one person, you, who's pushing for the appropriate measure of saving Michigan taxpayers a huge amount of money and creating a safer environment for every person traveling the roads in Michigan. Pat, let's now turn to, you have been a proponent of reform of the tax system in Michigan.
Yeah, actually, I'm an advocate of completely eliminating the state personal income tax in Michigan, and the senior pension tax disappears right along with it. And the reason for this is pretty clear. And by the way, whenever you say that you're going to go off and do this, they say, oh, that's impossible. Just like it's impossible to put a guy on the moon, just like it was impossible for me to get elected, just like it was impossible for us to get right to work passed in Michigan. So all those naysayers, I respectfully disagree with their perspective. So
I'm not proposing to eliminate it all at once. This is a case where you make the case for a persistent expense reduction on the part of state government. When you get in striking distance, you eliminate it all the way. So it's about a $9.7 billion gap you got to fix. And the opportunity when you eliminate that is significant here in the state of Michigan. We were the only state to have lost population in the 2010 census, the only. And so we've lost a lot of our brain trust here in the state of Michigan. And when you look at the fastest growing states in the country, they're states like Tennessee, Florida, Texas. They all have 0% income tax, 7% sales tax. Well, if Michigan eliminates our personal income tax, we're at 0% income tax, 6% sales tax. And so the goal is significant. It's about, or the gap is about $9.7 billion. But we were just talking about one of the key ingredients to achieving that gap. Have a $9.7 billion gap, and you find a way to deliver Medicaid to the people who need that care at a much more economic rate. Like, for example, $18 billion. You get a 20% savings on it. That's $3.6 billion to that $9.7 billion number. Now you're down to about a $6.1 billion gap. If you start eliminating all the crony subsidies that we have via something called the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the Michigan Strategic Fund, which is essentially the government using taxpayer funds to play the role of the capitalist. And they're putting your money as a taxpayer on the roulette wheel, betting on what technologies are going to work or not work. So they get a lot of $60,000 jobs and pay $180,000 for each one of those jobs. It's not a good use of taxpayer money. That's $1 billion that if you take that down, that's another $5.1 billion. So we're getting closer to eliminating that state personal income tax. Economic growth, if we add another 5,000 sector jobs like we did over the last 8 years, now you got an opportunity to add another $1.9 billion in net revenue and expense decreases against that $5.1 billion number. So now you're sitting at 3.2. And you keep on going with things like removing sales tax fraud. If you remember, in the state of Michigan, we had a restaurant chain called Lashish Restaurant. Mm-hmm. They got busted for funneling about $20 million out to Hamas. And they used the sales suppression software technology called a Zapper. And they've done sting operations where they've identified 17 out of 20 cash register vendors offer this as an add-on cash register. That shows that it's pretty prevalent. Mm-hmm. And the estimate for lost sales tax revenue without increasing taxes or anything else is about $1 billion per year in the state of Michigan. So now you're down to what, $2.2 billion. And so you can see this is something that if you are very systematic about it, it is something you can take all the way down to zero and eliminate that state personal income tax. And the benefit is amazing. All the citizens of Michigan get an instant 4.25% pay raise. The small business entities that are usually pass-through entities and in regards to their tax at the state personal income tax rate, they receive a benefit because now they're going to be able to hire more employees. They're going to be able to pay their employees more. They're going to be able to be more competitive in the marketplace. It's a great economic development tool as well.
Let's turn to education. You mentioned earlier in this interview, you are not a proponent of Common Core. In fact, most teachers I know are not proponents of Common Core. In fact, I'm aware of a huge number of teachers who have retired early because they felt very similar to what I felt about Obamacare and why I retired earlier than I would have anticipated was because I felt that there was government overreach in the workplace in medicine. And these teachers that I know, many teachers, are saying the same thing, that they have retired because they felt government overreach in their workplace related to Common Core. Your take on the educational system and what needs to be done.
Well, Common Core is nothing but top-down micromanagement of the classroom. So the feds are getting involved now. It's technically a national standard. It's not the federal government going off and pushing it, but the feds are involved in the assessments that are being offered in Common Core called Smarter, Balanced, and PARC. And essentially what they're doing is going well beyond saying, here's what our standards are. They're actually telling teachers how to teach. And I'm a big believer that the only time I've ever seen, I served on the Senate Education Policy Committee for 7 years before I was ceremoniously dispensed with and by Senator Meekop. But whenever I saw a turnaround in the performance of any school, it was because the parents, the teachers, and the students say enough is enough, not on my watch. We're going to turn this thing around. It's not. There's nobody in an ivory tower up in Lansing or state capitals across the country or in D.C. that have ever come in and fixed what's going on in the individual classroom. It comes down to a local push, what's best for the students and what's best for the parent in that particular environment. And so I've been pretty strident on my opposition to core standards. I've had legislation that I've gotten passed out of the Senate Education Policy Committee, but folks like Senator Meekop blocked it on the Senate floor and killed it. And so it gets a little frustrating. But I think the key is to get back into the mode of letting or empowering parents with the decision and empowering teachers as to how their students should be instructed.
Pat, we've mentioned that you have faced the wrath of Republican leadership because of you being a freedom fighter, for playing it down the middle, for putting the interests of the citizens of Michigan, and frankly the citizens, every citizen in the United States, ahead of the special interests and the lobbyists. You've also faced tremendous wrath from folks in the Democrat Party. And by way of example, there is an individual who's running on the governor's side, from the Democrat side, who I believe has support of tremendous number of globalists and progressives, and that's an individual by the name of El Sayed. El Sayed has, and I'm going to try to be as diplomatic as I can on this, Pat, but what I have witnessed is beyond hostility generated by him against you.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because we're putting a little flashlight of truth on them.
Well, educate everyone. What is the flashlight of truth that you have shined or shown, right? Have it focused, if you will, on El Sayed?
Well, a few months back, I had the opportunity to participate in a forum called See Something, Say Something. I was joined by former Department of Homeland Security counterterrorism expert Phil Haney and a former member of the Muslim Brotherhood by the name of Kamal Salim. By the way, Kamal endorsed me for my gubernatorial run, and I had the audacity at this seminar or this forum to go off and point out the ties between Dr. Abdul Sayed and the Muslim Brotherhood. He had his parents, his father-in-law, was a former president of CAIR, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is identified as a terrorist organization by the United Arab Emirates. Abdul Sayed himself was a vice president of the Muslim Students Association, which was formed by the Muslim Brotherhood in 1963. Their credo, their pledge that they say at their meetings is, Allahu Akbar, jihad is my spirit, I will die to establish Islam. That is not the Boy Scout oath. And I thought it was important that people in this election cycle understand that this gentleman has allegiances to organizations that are tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood has a stated plan. It's documented in a document called the Explanatory Memorandum to engage in civilization jihad in the United States. That is to undermine our system of government and replace it with a caliphate, where Sharia law would be universal across the board. I think it's important that voters understand that, especially because Sayed has got a stated public policy position of wanting to make Michigan a sanctuary state. And I personally oppose that approach. And
isn't it making the state of Michigan, and tell me if I'm wrong, Pat, because you're a student of the Constitution, but if I remember correctly, there is something called the Supremacy Clause.
Yeah, Article 6, Section 2. Yeah.
Now, am I wrong on this? That if he is stating that Michigan should be a sanctuary state, to me, in my recollection of the Constitution, that is that is a issue when it comes to the Supremacy Clause, is it not?
Absolutely. But it is consistent with his support of Sharia law, right? Because Sharia law supersedes the Constitution.
But Pat, when you confronted him on that, did he deny that he was supportive of Sharia law? Did he deny that he had affiliations with CARE? Did he deny he had affiliations with the student organization that has ties into the Muslim Brotherhood?
No. Yeah, no. What he did is he played the race card and the bigot card, and he got support from members of the media in that process. It's a funny thing. God's got a bit of a sense of humor. So when we had a forum, a gubernatorial forum, in front of the Michigan Press Association a few weeks ago, and all the gubernatorial candidates in Michigan were there, including Brian Calley and Bill Schuette and Jim Hines on the Republican side, and also Ed was there with other Democratic candidates. And at the end of this forum, somebody came up and asked about Sharia law. And I responded, as I talked about earlier in this interview, about his ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And I went on to say, listen, I love Muslims. I love everybody that's out there. This is not an issue. I'm a Christian. I believe that I'm called to love everybody out there. But that doesn't mean I accept their ideology. And the bottom line is this Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. It has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with race. Well, he responded in front of 150 members of the Michigan Press Association by saying, you may not hate Muslims, but Muslims definitely hate you.
Wait, he stated that Muslims hate you.
Yeah, that is a definition of hate speech, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
On this whole English thing, but
what was the response to that, Pat?
The response from my colleagues was silent on the part of Schuette. Calley says he doesn't agree with my assertions. Hines has been openly in support of Welcoming Michigan, which is essentially the refugee program here in the state of Michigan. And so it was, let's just say, not a lot of support. The Republican Party came out with a statement in opposition to me as well, because they're supportive of Bill Schuette, and they wanted to make sure anything that pounds me down an inch builds him up in their estimation. So I was very frustrated by the response, but I was even more frustrated by the response of the media, because you would think that would be headline news, right? Michigan gubernatorial candidate goes off and says that that all Muslims hate one of the candidates for running for office, but that's not what happened. The only stories that did talk about that statement at all, if you actually were to do it in a Mad Lib fashion, you actually look at the structure of it, it was Colbeck bad, Colbeck bad. Oh, here's what Al-Sayed said: Colbeck bad, Colbeck bad. And it was trying to set it up so that they're saying that Colbeck is the one promoting this to help his campaign. I never brought this up. Al-Sayed brought up that whole see something, say something discussion with BuzzFeed, tried to make it a national issue to prop him up. And it's just that he's using the media as a tool, and they're protecting him and protecting the others who espouse his views.
Pat, let me see if I have this correct. You have an individual on the Democrat side of the equation here, Al-Sayed, who's advocating for the state of Michigan to become a sanctuary state, which is in direct opposition to the Constitution. You have spoken against that, yet the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, Bill Schuette, who is supposed to uphold the Constitution of the state as well as the federal Constitution, has not backed you on this. About taking him on this. He has not gone after Al-Sayed on this. The current lieutenant governor of the state of Michigan, Calley, has not taken him up on this. And the other individual in the primary, Hines, is all about the refugee resettlement program moving ahead forward in the state of Michigan and has not taken him up on this.
No. And
okay.
The press has gone up.
So then, this is a huge problem. This is a huge problem. I mean, just from a constitutional standpoint, your opponent on the Democrat side is supporting an unconstitutional situation for the state of Michigan, yet no other primary contender on the Republican side other than you, has voiced opposition to this unconstitutional act that El Sayed would like to take?
Yeah, combining principles and politics seems to be a very lonely position.
Now, Pat, I want to conclude this interview with the following. I want you to assume that President Trump has been watching this entire interview and will watch the remainder of this interview. When President Trump was elected in November of 2016, there was some voter irregularities, in particular in Wayne County. Now, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I was in touch with you as you were fighting in hand-to-hand combat in Wayne County in downtown Detroit, outing the voter irregularities that benefited Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
Yet I never saw the Attorney General Schuette, the Lieutenant Governor Calley, down there fighting hand-to-hand combat. Am I right? Am I wrong on that?
Well, I had members of my team down in Detroit going off and overseeing the recount activities. But what I did in Lansing was I submitted a letter to the Attorney General and to the Secretary of State asking for an investigation into voter fraud in the wake of that election. In response to that, the Secretary of State issued an investigation. They identified 31 counts of voter fraud. The Attorney General did that. I can tell you right now that out of those 31 counts of voter fraud, there are 0 prosecutions. So the Attorney General claims he's tough on voter integrity, but when he had an opportunity to step up to bat, right now he's struck out. He hasn't done anything to go off and protect it. And, what kind of message does that tell people that are interested in committing additional voter fraud? I mean, this was just a superficial investigation by the Secretary of State. They identified specific instances where people voted multiple times in our election. What happens if they make this something that is much more systematic in the upcoming elections? It's something that I find reprehensible, and it's not the only instance of him shirking his duties in this regard.
Pat, has President Trump endorsed anyone in this campaign?
Yeah, he's endorsed Bill Schuette.
Okay. It's my understanding, and I did not get this from you, Pat. I did a lot of research on this because I found it hard to believe that he did not throw his support initially behind you because of your efforts at trying to get to the bottom line in November of 2016 when it was really hitting the fan, when they were talking about recounts in the state of Michigan through Jill Stein and trying to get the election thrown toward Hillary. And you were fighting for freedom and for President Trump at that point. I also found it hard to believe that, of why he would support and throw his support behind Schuette when Schuette has not prosecuted anyone as it relates to this voter fraud issue. The research I did, Pat, the research I did, Pat, as I understand it, the reason why President Trump endorsed Bill Schuette is because another attorney general who's friendly with Bill Schuette by the name of Pat Biondi, I believe, from Florida, it's my understanding, convinced President Trump that he should support Schuette. I believe that's a huge mistake, and I realize the president is watching this. I understand that the president is not going to be happy with me saying this. I believe it's a big mistake. I believe it's a big mistake as the events as it rolled out in the state of Alabama, and I'm trying to prevent another recurrent mistake in that regard. Pat, President Trump is watching this. Educate President Trump on why he should now support you and abandon his support of Bill Schuette.
Well, first of all, I think he got some bad information from people that he trusted. And second of all, there's one person who's been fighting a fight that President Trump has been fighting up in D.C., namely fighting against the swamp, trying to push policies that are advocating for the best interests of the people. And when you look at my track record, I believe that it's pretty clear who's been on the side of the people here in Michigan. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, Bill Schuette can't win in the general election. Everybody's looking at financial balances. I'm telling you, there is a anybody but Schuette campaign that you won't believe here in the state of Michigan. And that's translated in the general election. Our team has grassroots support. Many of the people that put President Trump into office the ones that were putting up yard signs nonstop are putting up yard signs nonstop for us. They're devoting their last measure of time and treasure to support us. And just like they did for President Trump during the presidential election, there is an enthusiasm behind our campaign because people are sick and tired of politics as usual. If Bill Schuette is our candidate here in the state of Michigan, we have the risk of having somebody like Abdul al-Sayed being the next governor of Michigan. And I believe he's going to be the Democratic nominee. Mm-hmm. I don't believe it's going to be Gretchen Whitmer. I believe it's going to be Abdul al-Sayed. He's got the money. He's got the Bernie Sanders campaign supporting him. And that's who won Michigan in that last election, and it was all on grassroots. It's going to be a juggernaut of two different grassroots campaigns. I believe I will win and be the only candidate because I'm outspoken on the issue that matters to the people of Michigan. I'm the only candidate who can be victorious in that general election. And that'll break the cycle we have here in Michigan where we constantly flip-flop between a Republican governor for 8 years and a Democratic governor for 8 years. They keep going back and forth. That's because we keep putting forward politics as usual candidates. It's time for us to be bold, just as our president's been bold. It's time to restore the voice of the people here in Michigan, just like he's been doing in D.C.
Pat, it's also my understanding that a player behind al-Sayed is George Soros. Am I wrong?
It's his brother, technically. He's a Soros scholar. But when you look at his financial contributions, 45% of those contributions come from out of state. They're literally trying to buy this election from people that are outside of the state of Michigan. He's been actively promoted on national platforms. I think some very widely read magazines have had him on the cover saying he's the first Muslim governor. He's been groomed since he was 14 years old for this. The gentleman is very charismatic, and he is the support of. He was elected by a student body at my alma mater, University of Michigan, as a speaker for their commencement address, where he got a shout out from Bill Clinton. He is being groomed for this position, and it's my objective to make sure he never sees the governor's office in the state of Michigan.
Pat, every one of our viewers, every one of our listeners should support you, either monetarily, philosophically, networking. How can they do it?
There's a couple ways. You mentioned you got a lot of international viewers as well. Can't accept contributions from folks overseas unless they're Americans, only American citizens. But I've got a book called Wrestling Gators, and they can purchase that, and that helps get the word out. And they can share that with their friends and family anywhere. Make sure that this book was written out of frustration when I come home from work every day. And I wanted to provide people with a window on how government really works behind the scenes so that the grassroots can actually know how to push and pull the correct levers of power to get things recalibrated to respect the voice of the people. But the more direct way you can help us with our campaign is by contributing to colbeckforgovernor.com. You can do it offline. You can do it online. You can text ROCKET to 91999. I'm an aerospace engineer. That's what inspires that theme. We want to take Michigan to a higher level than we have been. And frankly, get the word out to friends and family. Our big issue right now is name recognition. I've gone all across the state. Every time I go into a place, my message resonates with the people. We flip rooms on a regular basis from Bill Schuette, from Brian Calley, from Jim Hines over to our message. And we even flip people from the Democratic side of the ticket, as I was talking about in Stillman, Michigan, and I can give you a lot of other examples around that as well. But we got to get the message out, and your contribution help us to get on the air. TV ad campaign, all of our money right now is going into fueling the grassroots army, but to take it to the next level and get into the margin of people that are not plugged into politics on a regular basis, we need to reach it via other media opportunities. So, and it's not much money. It's about $60,000 for a cable buy. It's about $15,000 for a pretty good radio buy. I mean, we're not talking a lot of money. The maximum contribution per individual is $6,800. And if you can help us out in that, it doesn't take too many people pulling their resources together to get us across the finish line. And this is imperative. When we win on August 7th in the summer, it will send a shot around the world. This is going to be analogous to what happened when Eric Cantor got defeated by Dave Bratt. This is going to be analogous to when Donald Trump came through and beat up 16 other Republican gubernatorial candidates to get across the finish line. This will be essentially an opportunity to demonstrate that winning in politics is about much more than money, which tees it up for less importance being played on people who are selling their soul to lobbyists and PAC money when they're running for office. And maybe they'll start serving in a manner that is principled instead of one that fills out the people that they were elected to serve.
Colbeck, Colbeck. Give us the website again and the text numbers, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so Charlie, Oscar, Lima, Bravo, Echo, Charlie, Kilo, for Governor, FOR, governor.com. And also if you, you can go off and check out our book at Amazon. It's actually a #1 bestseller in 2 different categories, and we haven't even started advertising. People are hungry for an understanding of what has gone wrong with our system of government. But if you go up to colbeckforgovernor.com, that's the best way to do this. Remember, our primary is August 7th, so people are going to start voting absentee as early at the end of June. So time is of the essence. If you can get the word out now, that's great. And also just share the word with your friends and family that you may have in Michigan. Make sure that they're aware of the fact that there is a door number 3. That they don't have to go with what the media is pushing with the lieutenant governor and the attorney general. There is another option that's seeking to serve their best interests, not the lobbyists. That's not politics as usual. That actually respects them.
Pat, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, everything you are doing, and everything that you will do. You are incredibly courageous, as is your wife, for taking on the Senate seat you did. By being incredibly courageous, but also having tremendous amount of perseverance and focusing like a laser light on freedom and on liberty. You are an incredibly unique individual. You are a very honest individual. You are a person, I believe, who will be, when it's all said and done, the most outstanding governor in Michigan's history, because you truly put the interests of people ahead of your own interests, and lobbyists don't even get through the front door. My dad was always fond of saying the statement, dream big and dare to fail. Pat Colbeck, you are the epitome of that statement, dream big and dare to fail. And I'd like to thank you for everything that you are doing and everything that you will do. And you will not only have an impact on the people of the state of Michigan, as you already have, but I believe you will have an enormous impact on every American from every state in the years to come. I'd like to thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, your support and words. And appreciate it.
Folks, as we sign off every segment, this is Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thank you for joining us, and get out there and help Pat. It's the best thing you'll do. Take care.